So welcome once again. This is Dr. Bart Rademaker for your prescription for your transformation. Hashtag real people, hashtag real conversations. I had to get my bearings there for a second. I'm back in Florida, came back from the Bahamas yesterday. Did some phenomenal work on regenerative medicine using stem cells. But here's what's really fascinating about what's possible in our life is that there are natural ways that we can also regenerate our systems. And the way that we get to regenerate our systems, giving our bodies what it really needs to be healthy, what it really needs to have this ideal weight, what it really needs to function in the best possible way. And so I'm excited today to be talking to this brilliant person. And I've been watching her on Facebook and sensing her vibration and energy. And she has this wonderful gift and also a wonderful mission out there to really help the world have a much better relationship with their food and finding that space where they can experience what aliveness is really all about. So welcome, Dr. Stephanie May. Thank you so much. You have tons and tons of experience in psychology, in eating issues, if you will, but also an action area, which maybe if we have some time we'll talk about, but about imago. So welcome to this platform. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I must admit, I loved listening to your introduction. It makes me feel that much more excited about the work that I'm doing because it's true. Everybody wants vibrancy and aliveness in their lives. So this is a great opportunity for us to talk about how I help people get there.
So let's talk about this first, and then in a moment, also would love to hear your story because I think the one thing that people relate most with are people's stories and what's happening with that. And so, but what is it that you do? What is your mission, and what is this whole global conversation, as you like to put it, about aliveness?
Yeah, great. That's a great place to start. Okay, so first of all, Aliveness is a company that I have founded online with my team, and we offer programs for conscious eating and intentional living. And what we really believe is that when people learn how to consciously eat and people learn how to intentionally create their lives, that's where aliveness happens. And as I was explaining to you when we had our pre-production call, Bart, people spend so much time and money and energy on their struggles with food and their weight that literally it's like their lives get smaller. And so you can imagine when people overcome these struggles, that what's possible is that their lives can only get bigger and they can be freed up to really rise into the greatest expression of who they are. And so that's our mission through conscious eating and intentional living, that we create aliveness out in the world for people.
Oh, I just love what you just said. That's absolutely wonderfully and amazing. Um, so here's my question. Why is this not happening naturally anyhow? I mean, where is the challenge? Where is the chokehold, if you will, from people just naturally having that experience anyhow?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, well, first of all, let me just explain a little bit more about what conscious eating is, and then I'll be able to answer your question even better. So conscious eating is the recognition that we bring all parts of ourselves into our relationship with food. I often say we bring all parts of ourselves when we go into a meal. And what that really means is that we bring our physical selves into a meal, but we also bring our emotional selves, our energetic selves, our spiritual selves. So we're bringing all parts of ourselves into a meal. And if we don't slow down enough to get conscious to all those different parts, what happens is we sit down, we have 15 minutes for lunch, and we gobble up our food. And I don't know, maybe we don't eat enough, maybe we don't eat the foods that our body really needs, or we eat way too much and then we go, oh my God, I'm so full. How did I get so full? So, conscious eating is really about slowing down and getting mindful of all those different parts of ourselves so we can make the clearest and best choices when we go in with our food. And I really believe this, but I don't teach people to lose weight. But what often happens is that people discover their ideal body weight when they learn how to consciously eat. And so the conversation about weight loss becomes insignificant at that point, which is really a beautiful and awesome benefit for so many people that I know are struggling with that. So here I am talking about conscious eating, and now I have forgotten what your original question is. So can we go back to that too?
Well, I like to hold on this for a second because
Yeah.
what I love about the whole concept about conscious eating is that you're choosing to be really aware of your own body, and you're choosing, just to be mindful and giving yourself that time to actually experience it. And there's a wonderful book, it's called Positive Intelligence by Shamin Shirzad, where he talks about this as well. And he says, look, when you eat a meal, or actually when you prepare the meal, just think of all the things that you're doing as you prepare, as you're cutting up the tomatoes, cutting up the onions. And that's what I do now when I cook. I love cooking. I grow my own sprouts, and I juice. And I bought a juicer many years ago and stopped doing it because I didn't like the cleanup. Now the cleanup is actually part of my meditative process and being mindful and conscious, as you like to put it. So
Yes.
it's a wonderful concept that
Yes.
people should really begin to embrace so much more.
Yeah, and but the one thing that I do want to add to this conversation, because it's really important to me, to those of you that are listening, that you really understand that I'm not just a doctor and I'm not this like perfect enlightened being. I mean, I am a busy mom with two little boys and a house where there's just always chaos. It seems like there's always an activity or a flurry of something going on. And so, what I don't want you to leave this conversation thinking is that conscious eating is only for these really patient, enlightened yogi people, right? So, conscious eating is really just about being able to tune in long enough to hear the whispers from your own body.
Mhm.
And that might take more time in the very beginning. Maybe it'll take up 2 to 5 minutes for some people. I mean, the longest I've seen, some people really struggle with it, 15, 30 minutes. But as you practice tuning in, and I've practiced this now for so long, Bart, it sounds like you've practiced that mindfulness for so long, it becomes second nature, and you can literally almost do it from one moment to the next. And so I just want to encourage you that if the idea of tuning in and really listening and taking just a few extra moments to pause just sounds absolutely horrible to you, I would just say keep going. It gets easier, and just give it your best shot to get started.
And I'm glad you said that because it's not how I started originally. I started originally probably about 5 years ago when I made a very conscious choice, and it didn't happen all the time, was just to be aware of how I felt after the meal.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 2 hours, and then recognizing, well, I've got this headache, or I feel very
Good.
tired, or my stomach is uncomfortable, and just noticing that, making the relationship with whatever that I ate. And my biggest struggle originally was I used to drink a lot of Coke, but every single time I feel bad, and so I made that relationship that Coke made
Yeah,
me,
you made the connection.
and then I stopped drinking Coke. I do it once in a while now, and it's like a reminder. Nope, can't do that.
Uh-huh. You're right. So it doesn't matter where you start. You can start in these really small ways. And this is where I always, as we talk about this, I always love to tell this story. So one of the reasons I got into this work was because I struggled myself with food. I was an overeater. I was a stress eater, but then I would hate the way that my body would look as a result of that. And then so I'd go out and I'd over exercise and push myself way too hard, get injured, and then be a bump on the log, and then the whole cycle would start all over again, right? So it was a really vicious cycle that I was trapped in for, I would say, 15 years. And I always love to tell the story of one of the foods that I always used to sort of binge on or overeat were Doritos. And as I started to study this idea of conscious eating or mindfulness, I actually tasted a Dorito one day. So after years of overeating Doritos, I finally slowed down long enough and I said, you know what? My one thing is I'm just going to start tasting the food that goes in my mouth. So I tasted a Dorito and I said, oh my God, all I taste, sorry, Dorito, are chemicals and disgusting cheese. And that was literally the end of my overeating habit with Doritos because I finally discovered I don't even like this. I do not even like what I'm putting in my mouth. And so I love what you're saying about discovering what is that just one step that you can start with to get more conscious so that you really, really experience yourself and what your needs are as you go into a meal, during the meal, and after the meal.
So let me ask you a question in regards to this as well, because this is my own personal theory and never substantiated, but it's worked perfectly well for me. Is that whatever food that we desire at any given time, it's really our body letting us know that we need certain kinds of nutrients and that
Mhm.
there's certain things that we need. And what's interesting then is that you can overeat something to get enough of a nutrient to cover the needs of the body. But the problem is that when you overeat that particular thing to get the amount that you need, you also get too much of, say, your calories. And what's interesting as well with, the food industry, there's so much research today as to how to kind of trick the brain to have more, to have a greater desire for different things. And so now that I'm aware of, okay, foods might trick me into thinking one thing or another, then I ask myself that question: what is it that I actually really do need? And oftentimes, a big mistake I think people make is that so often people are very dehydrated. I mean, I
Mm,
guess the number is 75% of the population
I
is
believe
actually
it.
dehydrated. Food provides water. And so I think sometimes people, when they're dehydrated, they actually eat when they really should just drink some water.
Yeah, that's a great point, you know, and I mean, there's some things that you're talking about that it may take a physician's level, a great degree of education to really understand, oh, why do I need that nutrient? So that might be a little complex for some people, Bart, but I think just to state it very simply is that when we develop a conscious relationship with ourselves that we'll start to notice more and more. And I think the key is also that we start to notice sooner because in this goes back to your original question. What are some of the challenges? In this particular moment in time, we're all so busy doing. We have our phones right next to us at all times, right? And so we're so stimulated that it's really easy to miss some of these early signals from our bodies. Yeah. Oh, between you and me, we've got 10 different devices around us. And so it's really easy to miss some of the early signals. And then what ends up happening is that we wait so long that we do overdo it. So by the time we finally drink water, you'll see somebody gulping down water, and by then they're already dehydrated. Or by the time we get to lunch and we're just eating so fast and we want more food, it's because we've been hungry for way too long. So, absolutely, one part of this process is really about how do I kind of protect my energy, protect my space so that I can be connected and tune in. And I want to use this phrase really intentionally because this is one of the lessons that we teach in our aliveness programs. The first lesson we teach people is called Hear the Whispers. So it's about hearing the whispers from your own body, hearing the whispers from your soul so that you can really nourish yourself instead of waiting too long or instead of choosing the wrong solutions to what you really need.
Nice. So when you teach that, when you give, say, instructions or directions to hear those whispers, can
Mhm.
you share some of those with us?
So, in other words, what exactly do we teach people around hearing the whisper? Well, first of all, for a lot of people, just this concept alone is really different. People are getting more and more disconnected from themselves. We're so outward focused that we're not spending enough time inward. I always love the image of people would say, you know, years ago, people for fun would go sit out in their front yard and you'd watch your neighbors kind of go by. You'd watch the sky, right? And that these were typical habits of people not that long ago. So our habits have changed so much, but our bodies haven't evolved that much. So our bodies are being put under a tremendous amount of stimulation. And so we really teach people, how do you create space so that you can start to hear the whispers? And even right now, if you're listening to this interview, and I would invite you to do this, I mean, the easiest way to hear the whispers would be to close your eyes and just to allow yourself just to sit silently. And when we close our eyes, what we do is we basically tune into some other senses. So that's really valuable, to shut off our sense of sight and to focus in on these other senses that we have. And even right now, one thing I would invite you to do in this stillness is just kind of notice how hungry you are right now in this moment. And just sort of feel where you have the sensation, if you have the sensation of hunger. And on a scale of 1 to 10, even rate how hungry you are. So 10 would be, I am ravenously hungry. So you're right now, I can see, I'm watching you, right? You're tuning in, and instead of noticing everything around you, you're going inside and you're just, it sounds so simple, but I love that because that's what we really need now. We need to return to some simplicity again. And even though it sounds obvious, it actually is something we've got to put some effort back into. So how was that for you, Dr. Bart?
I loved it, and you know, it's fascinating how much you're not conscious of when you're busy doing stuff. And so I started noticing my feet and the position of my feet and my toes, and then I was noticing there's a little fan down here, and I kind of noticed the sound, and then the difference of the air on different parts of my body. So I was noticing like hundreds of things, you know, not sequentially, if you will, not all at once, of course. And and it's nice because it created in me a really nice sense of peace.
Hmm. Yeah, and you must be practiced because you went into yourself very quickly. So again, for those of you that aren't as practiced, you know, just know that that's what comes. What you just saw Dr. Bart do, that's what comes as you really stay with it. And if again, if you just take one thing from this interview, you can see that would be one great example of go inside, close your eyes, and then ask yourself, how hungry am I really? So I do want to say one more thing about this because I really liked what you were saying. Gosh, I noticed all these things. It was like you became more alive when your eyes were closed. You were so much more in the moment. And so what I would put out there is imagine that you were eating a dessert and you love this dessert. This is the best dessert that I ever have had. And you look forward to this dessert, and the dessert is in front of you. And here's what most of us do. Because we're so excited and we love that dessert. But if we were to take a bite and we were to do what you just did, and we were to just to close our eyes and just really enjoy it with all of our senses, how many bites of that dessert do you think you would actually want? How
I might,
many?
might just end up with one, right?
You might just end up with one. And so, what would that be like in our lives if we enjoyed every bite so much more instead of thinking it was about having more? What would it be like just in life if we enjoyed what we had so much that it
Right.
wasn't about always having more? And that's what our mission is, and that's what we teach people in our aliveness courses.
Well, I am very excited about this interview today because this is so important and it's so easily, you know, embraced, if you will, and it feels so naturally good. And the results, of course, are just going to be absolutely amazing because the kind of health that everyone will get to experience, is going to be life changing in every respect.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the ability to do things that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to do simply because you are so much healthier. The fact that you don't have to see people like you and me who are doctors, right? Because you're so healthy, and it's just a conscious choice. It's by intention. But one thing, and I'd like to wrap it up after this, one comment or part of the conversation, which I think is absolutely vital, is that once again in our cultural chaos, if you will, and not by any criticism or by anybody's fault, but there's so much information out there that sometimes it's hard to know what's right for you, and that creates a certain kind of fear and vulnerability about having certain kinds of conversations. Sometimes you just don't even know what that conversation needs to be. And what I love about what you're doing is that you're creating this global community to lift people up, to talk about these things, to
Yeah.
make it absolutely safe. And in this safe environment, people can then really begin to express and discover what's going on inside of themselves, if only by being able to do that or just listening to other people being so vulnerable and raw. And I love what you said earlier on prior to the interview, that this is a conversation that people must have, and that resonates totally with me, and that's why I have this platform.
Ah, that's great. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I would say it that when we become a part of a community that is speaking this language of conscious eating. See, Dr. Bart and I we never spoke before today. And honestly, he didn't really know what we were going to talk about, but he's already speaking the language of conscious living. So I'm speaking the language of conscious eating, so we could come together and we got each other just like that. So when you become a part of a community who speaks the same language of conscious eating and intentional living, then it not only gives you permission to share more of yourself, to overcome your struggles, but I would even go so far to say I think it's a critical element in maintaining your success.
Mm.
So it's like saying, and you've had this experience, I'm sure. You've been to great workshops, you've learned great material. You're like, oh my God, I'm never going to forget this material. And then you go back into your life and you forget the material.
Yep.
But when you learn the material and then you remain part of a community who reinforces that concept over and over and over again, then it becomes second nature for you. And that is exactly what we have set out to do. That's why we've created this global community where people can access these programs online, become part of the community online, and have support like that from anywhere in the world.
That's absolutely wonderful, and I hope a lot of people get to hear this today, and also in the future, because I know that you and I are going to be talking a lot more, bringing more people, to this platform to have this conversation, because this is a very important conversation, and also because of creating that community where, you can learn things, you can get that support, and you know that you're on the right track. Because too often you go back, like you said, you go to these events, these workshops, and you go back home, and then people don't understand you, and then you kind of go back to the way of living that they used to live. And so when you want to make progress, just join communities like Dr. May's here, so that you can find what's really true for you, and you can find that best aliveness, or
Mm,
just that aliveness, if you will. I mean, it's great to feel alive, right?
You got it. You got it. So I really want to acknowledge you before we end. For those of you that are listening, you may already know Dr. Bart Rademaker. I, of course, am just meeting him. But my understanding is he is a plastic surgeon and you
Yeah.
help a lot of people physically. But what you told me and what I've already gotten from you is that you really have set out on a mission to help people on all levels. So he doesn't have to be here doing these interviews, but he made it his personal mission to educate himself and want to educate other people on what it really means to be fully alive, to be fully whole, fully healthy. And that's why we're here. So thank you so much again for the opportunity.
No, thank you. And I really enjoy this conversation, and I might have to hire you as my PR person now because I appreciate that acknowledgement. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Sure.
So, Dr. May, thank you so much. And last question for you: how do people find you?
Yeah, thank you. Sure. You can find us at www.alivenessprograms.com. And depending on the time you're watching this video, we have a conscious eating course beginning January 30th, 2017. And I hope you'll reach out to me and join us for that very special experience.
And what I would like to invite you then is then perhaps right beforehand or during that program that you can report to us and let us know what's going on so that people can realize that they're missing out if they're not there and find out once again how to join your program and change their lives. So thank you so much, Dr. May. I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation. Hashtag real people, hashtag real conversations, bringing to you incredible voices, new voices like Dr. May's, for your transformation, bringing new solutions, and finding your aliveness. So thank you so much. God bless.
All right. Bye-bye.